Hey everyone, welcome back to another Tic Tac Taiko. This week I'm doing video number 2 in my Naname Primer mini-series. Video number 1 was all about the angle of the drum, the stand itself, a little bit of history, a little bit of context, and this week it's all about the stance. This video took me a long time, not because of the footage, not because of the editing, but because I had a lot of ideas and I didn't know which direction I wanted to go and what paths to take. Ultimately, I decided to do less. There's still a lot in this video, but I've narrowed down the scope. There are easily dozens and dozens of ways a person can stand at and play naname, probably over 100. But rather than going into all of them and the variations within, I'm going to narrow things down to 5 basic most common naname stances, and they are parallel, angled, flat facing, flat side, and upright. And by most common, I mean these are the ones that audience members and players are most likely to encounter or do. Doesn't mean they're the best for every situation, doesn't mean they're the only ones, obviously, but for purposes of this video, these 5 will do. Now, as for the names of these stances, they only exist in this video. If you go to a Taiko dojo or a Taiko class and you say, I would love to learn the flat facing stance, they're gonna look at you funny because that name doesn't exist. What I'm doing in this video is taking each one of those 5 stances. I'm gonna talk about the identifying characteristics, how it may or may not be different from other stances, and then talk about the advantages and disadvantages, or the pros and cons. But before I do, I'm gonna ask you to click that like button somewhere down there and give me a thumbs up. Not just because it gives me a warm fuzzy feeling, no, although it does, but because then YouTube's algorithm will think, ooh, this video or these videos are good to show other people who may not know my channel exists, which is great, but even more important, who may not know Taiko exists. Now, as all of you can attest to, who have seen Taiko, who have fallen in love with Taiko, who play Taiko, encountering Taiko has been a huge experience, has been impactful, right? So imagine all these people who now know Taiko exists, start watching my videos, start looking for Taiko in their area. They might join your group, take your workshops, buy your merchandise, come to your concerts, buy your tickets, whatever it is. Liking my videos, even though it's a small thing, can have a very positive effect on the overall Taiko community. And with that, let's get to the stances. Welcome to my Naname stance setup. It's a little wonky, but it'll work. I've got painter's tape with lines and angles to help show the relative positions of me to the stand. I don't have Taiko on the stand, partially because it's really small and it's going to look silly, the one that I have, but also it's going to block some of the view, especially when I talk about footwork and where the foot can go. You don't actually need a drum to talk about the stance. So let's get to our first stance, the parallel stance. This is a really easy stance to understand. I'm going to draw a line between either the heels of my feet, the balls of my feet, maybe the center of either feet, and I'm going to make sure that that line matches the angle of the line of the stand, the long side. I am standing parallel to the stand. In this stance, I can't get too far back. I can't get too far away from the drum, which is okay. It's not a pro or a con, just a factor. So I'm going to be staying in a relatively small circle close to the drum. With all stances, you need to take note of what either foot is doing, the close foot and the far foot. In this case, the close foot, generally, I'm going to want to have either in that same parallel line or slightly inwards, slightly. And that will depend a lot on how much you're moving the lower body versus just holding stationary. The more I move, the more I need to be aware of where my knee is going. As long as it's going in the general direction of the toes, I'm good. Once the foot becomes too close or too farther inwards, if my movement takes me this way, or if my bend takes me this way, while the toes are pointed in another direction, that's all kinds of friction and all kinds of problems down the line. As for the back foot, let's diverge a little bit because this is going to apply to other stances as well. With the back foot, I generally have 5 options. 0 degrees, 45, 90, 135, and 180. We can easily eliminate the first and last choice right away because 180, no. Try it, you'll know right away. That's not a possibility. You're just gonna fall down. But 0, even though it's a little easier, I'm focusing more on staying upright than I will be on playing or anything else. So those two are off the table. And that leaves us with inside, neutral, outside, 45, 90, and 135. In the parallel stance, with my foot at 135, I have the most potential to push off with the ball of the foot if I'm using a lot of lower body activation. It really helps drive a lot of power in the lower body so I don't need it in the upper body. If I'm neutral, I can still get some of that push. I can push off the ball, I can push off the heel, I can push off the side of the foot or a combination thereof and still get some of that same activation. When I turn the foot inwards, I'm much more front presenting. I don't have the ability to go back very far, but it's a very stable stance. So if I'm not thinking about using a lower body very much, this is a good alternative. And it's still parallel, as you can tell by the tape. Let's talk about the pros and cons of the parallel stance. When I am standing thusly, the drum is to my side and the audience is facing me, this is the most visually striking stance. You can see everything I'm doing in this quadrant, this quadrant, this quadrant, this quadrant. You can see everything equally, and it's very effective. Another pro is if I have a second drum, whether it's horizontal or diagonal, it's really easy to just make a couple of adjustments in my feet, still maintain that parallel line, and now I can play evenly without having to make a lot of adjustments to my stance. In the parallel stance, with my back foot open, my front foot more or less in that parallel line, I can have extremely good ergonomics, as long as my knees are always going in the direction of my toes. This is really comfortable when you get used to it. And over time, your knees, your joints, your ankles will thank you for it. And the last pro of the parallel stance is, even though one person playing it, it's cool and all, when you have 5 people, 10 people, 15 people, the uniformity of the stance starts to really have a visual punch. And you may not be aware of why it looks powerful, but you will see something that definitely strengthens the more people you have doing it. As far as the cons of the stance go, one of them is that the visual punch of the stance disappears once I'm playing more this way, when there's a drum in front of me, between me and the audience. Whether I'm flat this way or angled this way, which is a very common way of playing Naname. You can't really see what my back foot is doing, and the visual appeal of it is neutralized. The second and third cons are related, and they're kind of big. This parallel stance with one foot going in the same line and one foot open is San Jose Taiko's default Naname stance. As powerful and as enjoyable as it is, it's incredibly hard to do. It takes years of training to get even just used to moving like this. And it takes even more years of training to get anywhere close to comfortable. Why? Well, try it, but here's what makes it difficult. To be in this stance and to use the lower body, to turn the torso while not letting the knee dip is really, really difficult. I need to have the flexibility to keep my thigh open and the muscle strength in the legs to keep it from collapsing every time. To have this feeling versus this feeling. It's difficult. And because it will take years of practice to do well, you can easily argue that your time is better spent doing something else. Working on technique, working on solos, songs, musicality, anything else other than just brute forcing and getting the legs to work the way you want. And the con that's related to this is ergonomics. Even if I'm able to kind of get this leg to do what I want, it's really easy for the knee to move in. And over time, if I'm not paying attention, I got my knee going one way, my toes going the other. It's a recipe for disaster. Even if I move to a neutral position, still torquing and dropping the weight, knee goes this way, toe goes that way. Got to constantly reinforce this feeling, knee goes this way, knee goes this way, or knee goes this way, knee goes this way. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of mental energy. So again, that same question, is it worth spending all this time and energy on the stance when you could be doing other things? I can't answer that question. Only you can. The next stance is the angled stance. And this is not a brilliant name. This is a low-hanging fruit. So if I have my parallel stance and I move my, say, back foot 1 degree closer, now I'm in an angled stance. Anywhere between 1 and 45 degrees is angled. I mean, technically 60 degrees and more is angled, but once you get to 45 and past, the striking gets really awkward. It's harder to hit this way because now the drum is too flat to your strike with both hands. So I don't know what the optimal range is, but for purposes of this video, anywhere between 1 degree and 45 degrees is your angled stance. Now, I can move the back foot to create that stance, or I can move the front foot. The front foot comes back, I'm creating the same angle as if I was stepping forward. Because of this, there are a lot of different ways to stand at an angled stance playing naname. And because of that, there's a lot more options to stand further back, closer, far back this way, closer this way. Way more options than you would have with a parallel stance. Again, not a pro or a con, just a factor of the stance. In my guesstimate, the angled stance is the most common way a person will play or see naname. If you ask someone who's never played naname, but knows taiko, to try naname, odds are they're going to wind up at some sort of angle. This tells you something. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the best stance, but it probably is the most natural one. Now, as for the feet of the angled stance, I have more variations and variables to take into account, but knees over toes. That's the main rule. If I have a slight angle, it doesn't really change what I would do if I was parallel. But if the angle is sharper, closer to 45, I need to be careful of this foot. I might open the foot up, going out, but my intention, my momentum, my weight wants to go this way. Again, these angles are going to cause a lot of problem over time. But this is usually not the problem. Back foot's usually the problem. Now, when I'm parallel and I open my foot up, there's a lot going on here. When I make the stance angled, it alleviates a lot of the strain. Like, oh, I can keep my foot open and it's a lot easier, but I still have to be careful of ergonomics. Making it neutral, still pretty easy. Got to be careful of ergonomics. Bringing the foot in, same thing with the parallel stance. When I have my foot more inside compared to neutral or out, I'm starting to close off a lot of potential movement and motion, although I am gaining stability. So let's talk about the pros and cons of the angled stance. I mean, I kind of jumped the gun by saying it was the most common and most natural way. I would say that's a pro, because if I'm already starting in a natural position, there's a lot less I may have to adjust compared to the parallel stand where nothing is natural. Everything has to be taught. Another pro of the angled stance is that because there's so much allowance for variation, it accommodates a lot of preferences, a lot of limitations, body types, situations, whatever it is. It's a lot more versatile and malleable than parallel stance, which has one truth and one way. Now, I don't mean to compare this only to parallel stance, but these two are like sister stances. They have the most in common. As for the cons, let's start with the visual impact. When I am parallel, the more people playing the stance, the more visual impact grows. With the angled stance, it doesn't really grow. I mean, if you have 20 people playing naname and the feet are all different, it's still powerful, but it's not going to have that added level of uniformity that, say, the parallel stance would. Somewhat similar. With the parallel stance, again, I have this really powerful visual field, a plane to be on. Once I lessen it with the angle, already this is slightly diminished. Again, when I'm playing this way, that diminishment, that angle doesn't really matter. No one really cares where the back foot is because it's not as visible. This is what people are going to be watching. So it's a con, but it's a minor one. Now for the third con, which is related, as I talked about earlier, I have positions for my back foot. But there's something that happens here when the foot is turned to the inside. And I've seen this over and over again. Actually, more now than I think about it. Turning my foot in wants my knee and hips to turn in, which turns my torso in. And so when I play, I'm not playing naname anymore. I'm playing what I call betame. Let's look at beta. Up and down, straight in front. I can turn to the side, but it's still up and down. With my foot turned in and my torso turned towards the drum, I'm not playing at an angle anymore. I'm playing up and down. And I might adjust it for the angle of the drum, but it's more beta in a naname style. betame. And so while this isn't bad, it's not what most people, I think, really want to do. When people think naname, they tend to think angles, not up and down. So you need to be really careful. The more I'm turned towards the drum, the more my foot is turned towards the drum, the more likely I am to not be playing naname and to be playing betame. Now for the next two stances, I have to stay low so that I fit in the frame. I wish I had a bigger space, but you know what? We'll make it work. That's what taiko players do after all, right? So I'm using the tape that I put down to simulate the naname being here because I'm facing flat to it. I have the stand, I'm putting it off to the side because being here is going to block off some of the visuals, and honestly, it's not really going to help any. So let's talk about the flat facing stance. It's named that way because I am flat, my torso is flat to the head of the drum, and I am facing the drum, flat facing. The striking for this drum is across the head of the drum. I'm not going to get too much into this, that's what the third video is going to be about, but I'm striking across and striking up. This cutting motion. I can also play on the kaz, of course, and I can play more beta style, but I don't call this betame. This is more intentional. What betame is when people play naname to the side and turn and face unintentionally because that's all they know, versus here, I am playing intentionally in the flat facing stance. As for my stance itself, it's not completely in line like the parallel stance because now I'm doing a tightrope walk. And as I'm playing this way, I might have to start compensating from going back and forward, not so good. So I need to offset just a little bit. Back foot makes a slight rectangle, or maybe a little bit of a bigger rectangle, but not too far back because now I'm narrow, and as I strike across this way, I'm fighting this axis versus this axis. So just a little bit offset, but pretty wide. As far as the feet go, well, I could go this way, I could go this way, so I want my feet to kind of straddle either way. 45-ish because I could be going in either directions. So I'm not too far out, I'm not too far in. 45 works. So let's talk about the pros of this stance. I said this is one of the 5 most common stances, but this is an uncommon common stance, meaning taiko audiences don't see people playing in this stance very much. It could be a novelty, it could be more interesting for them. As for the player, a lot of people don't spend time practicing and playing here, so there's a lot of opportunities for new ways of striking that you may not have explored, new ways of moving into and out of or just being in this position. As I alluded to a minute ago, also, this is a lot like playing beta. Even though I'm not playing down and up, I'm cutting across, the legs are moving a lot like beta, down and up. I might be more like this when I normally play beta, but it's not that different. So it's a familiar type of mechanic. And also, like I alluded to before, weight distribution, 50-50, it's even. Now my default might be slightly this way, but I'm going to be moving both ways. So I want my feet and knees to be pointed about 45, my weight mostly down, compared to when I'm playing with the naname to the side. One leg is going to hold a lot of weight. One leg is mostly straight. Maybe there's flexibility issues going on here. I have 2 legs doing 2 different things. Here, I have 2 legs essentially doing the same thing. So in a lot of ways, the stance itself is way easier, way more familiar than when the naname is to the side. Now, as for the cons, because this is an uncommon stance of naname, a lot of people don't feel comfortable playing here. So they don't practice playing here, which makes them not comfortable playing here, which means they don't practice. It's a chicken and egg situation. In fact, a lot of times I see a person playing here, it's because they got here by accident. Like they're spinning and they're soloing and then they're here, it's like, and they don't want to be here for very long. And that's definitely a con, that feeling of being uncomfortable. And also, even though, again, striking is the 3rd video in the series, being able to strike well here is difficult. It requires a lot of the lower body. And until you know how to do it, strikes down may not feel comfortable, and strikes up, no, we don't do up strikes. Those are really hard. But it's very possible to make them even and strong. It takes a lot of work and a lot of understanding, which again, most people, overwhelming majority of people who wind up here have not and will not practice. I brought the naname stand out for our 4th stance, the flat side stance. I'm still flat to the head of the drum, but now I'm to the side of the drum. It's not a great name, but it'll do. This is kind of like a parallel stance, but instead of the naname being at this angle into the side, it's facing away from me. But my feet and my legs are kind of like I would be striking parallel. I've experimented with this. If my feet are more of an angle in, then especially the inside strike is really hard to do. I feel like I've got to get around the edge of the drum. And if I'm angled more out, I don't have to clear anything, but the angle for the outside hand doesn't feel as good. I feel like I have to compensate. So generally, the flat side stance tends to be more parallel, but you can experiment and see what works for you. In terms of the feet, well, normally they're this way, now they're this way. Not a lot to talk about. This is now the front foot. Whether I'm bending or shifting, it needs to go knees to toes. Back foot, outside, neutral, inside. Same things I've been mentioning before. The more you turn inside, the more your whole body wants to turn. The more you turn outside, the more flexibility and strength of your muscles that you're going to need. As for the pros, the first one is just like the flat facing stance. This is not a normal position to play in. So for a taiko audience, they might find it more novel, more interesting. Ooh, what will this person do? Versus the other 900 songs, which are like this. I'm not giving any shade to that. I play a lot of songs like this too. Just saying, this is not a common position, and as an audience member, you might get a little more interest this way. This is a whole new area to explore for a lot of people. Ooh, what motions will I make with the drum being this angle? Where will I go? How will I come in and out of the stance? What will I play? What patterns will emerge? Now there's one con for the stance, really just one, and it's a fascinating one to me. When I play naname in any other stance, I'm playing with the angle of my feet. I'm striking from outside of one foot to outside of the other foot, whether I'm parallel or angled, right? If I'm playing flat, I'm coming from outside of the angle of one foot and I'm striking across to the angle of the other foot. With me so far? Okay. The side facing stance, not the same. Because the angle of my feet go this way. I would be striking from the outside of one foot to the outside of the other foot. Oh, that's going to hit the body of the drum, isn't it? The head of the drum is this way. I need to strike here. Now that's obvious, but most people don't consider how much the lower body helps facilitate where their strikes go, even if they don't use the lower body very much. In this stance, my strikes are going this way. My stance is going this way. It is perpendicular. It is a very, very different way of striking. And so, if you're not used to using rotation, gravity, and have a really good wrist snap, being very flexible and fluid in your arm, then this strike, it's weird. It feels stiff. It's counter to everything your body wants to do. And so it's a big con, but it's also fascinating because it shows how your technique is or isn't evolved. The fifth and final stance of this video is the upright stance. I was going to call this casual stance, but I felt like that almost denigrates the stance. You can play it casually, but you can play any stance casually. So no, it's upright. You can play it casually or with intention, but it is an upright stance. So that's what I called it. The upright stance tends to be generally close to the drum, facing at a general diagonal, rather than facing sideways, one way or the other, because the angle of strike is still going towards the drum, so I still want to have that slight angle, just like I would in any of the longer stances. You can have your closer foot closer to the drum, your further foot closer to the drum, or neither. It's really a matter of preference or whatever the composer has told you to do. Because my feet are closer together, I'm really able to turn my torso way more than I might be able to with my legs apart. I can feel the tension, especially when I'm really into that stance. I have a lot less ability to turn. Here, I can turn a lot more, but I have to be aware of the ergonomics. Turning and twisting really starts to snake a lot of joints, knees, and ankles in ways that may not be good if you force it, if you're not really sure of what you should and shouldn't be doing. So let's talk about the pros and cons of the upright stance. This is a very easy stance to stand in. I mean, my back leg might get tired, I could switch it, but compared to big stance, opening things up, worrying about ergonomics. I'm just standing here, man, and my knees are slightly bent, pretty relaxed. So right off the bat, this stance is a lot easier on the lower body. And like I mentioned earlier, it's very adaptable. Maybe this foot's in front, or this foot's in front. Maybe I move something, maybe I go down, whatever it is. It's not a fixed position that has to be a certain spot with the left, certain spot with the right, as you might have with the other stances. It's just here. It's what works. And it allows for lots of motions. Doesn't limit what's going on up here. In fact, because you can twist and turn and do lots of things, maybe more so than a deeper stance, you might find you have more options going on. As for the cons, while yes, you might have more things that you can do here, this, the second half of the body, is visually not so impressive. I mean, if you've got really cool stuff happening here, it's not a big concern, but this stance does not have any inherent visual punch. Another disadvantage is that it kind of sucks if you're tall. And I say that with a smile, but it's true. Someone who's 5 feet tall and someone who's 6'3" are going to have a completely different experience when you're playing in an upright stance. Let's go back to the parallel stance. Assuming that everyone has the same amount of flexibility, you can get lower, you can get higher, you can adjust your height. Cool. But I'm tall, and if a drum that's low is comfortable for the average person, there's not much I can do to make it comfortable for me. I can bend my knees more. Okay, that's not a very good visual. I can stick one foot out more. Well, that's also not a good visual. I can do both, right? I'm limited by the height of the drum depending on my height. So for taller people, this stance, not so good. Now the third con is actually a big one. If I'm in a lower, wider, bigger, deeper stance, whatever, even if I don't use the lower body very much, I can understand how dropping the weight might add some striking power. I can push off to alleviate needing muscle. There's a lot of things the lower body will teach you, or at least is available to you relatively easily. But once I bring my feet together, that's all gone. And if I don't know how to do that with a shorter stance, my striking is going to suffer. Because when I'm here, oh yeah, okay, that's how I use my lower body if I want. Or even if I don't, it's strong and stable. I feel really grounded. But now I'm here. Where is that grounding? Where is that power coming from? It's still very possible, but you have to understand it here before you can activate it here. So in a way, this is a pretty advanced stance if you want to strike as effectively as you do in a bigger one. And those are your 5 most common Naname stances. Now, I'm sure some of you have opinions, questions, you agree, you disagree, whatever it is. I invite you to leave that feedback below, not just for me, but for other people in the taiko community to come across. Maybe that'll answer a question they had or lead to more questions. The third and final video in this series will be all about Naname striking. I've got some ideas on how I want to do that, but it's probably going to take a while like this video did. If you have ideas for other mini-series you might be interested in, feel free to let me know. I'm always open to ideas. And until next time, keep on practicing and be well.